Hello, welcome back to NOTCAST. It's 293 today, 27th of May 2023. I think this is number 293, I think. And I'm gonna answer a quick question, which I was asked for my 250th episode, which I rudely neglected to answer, but I just found out from Anthony Newsom. Hi, Anthony. Thanks for watching. Do you regularly listen to the CDs behind you? Is your enthusiasm for music still as strong as, say, when you were in your late teens? Very good question. I listen to the CDs very regularly, although I'm often not in the house. So I often think of CDs as being just like buying MP3s in a box. It's a data delivery system. And so for me, whilst I don't listen to CDs vastly often, this is my museum of modern music behind me. I spend almost all day, every day, listening to either music or watching films. And if I'm working and I have spreadsheets or documents that I need to work about, I've generally always got music going, or concert footage on YouTube or something like that. And so I spend at least a few hours every day listening to music. I'm obsessed with it, and music is the thing that when I was lost in the world, music kind of showed me where I was on the map, and so it's completely my thing, in the way that some people are totally obsessed with football teams, or drugs if they're a drug addict. My obsession is music is my drug. And also I think my obsession is probably at least as strong as it was when I was a teenager. My relationship has changed over time. The best music is music that I see new things in, which I hadn't previously seen things in. Maybe when I was 17 or 18 and I was listening to something like Depeche Mode's Violator, for example, I was thinking about those songs in the context of, I really like them. Whereas now, with the benefit and hindsight of 30-something years of experience, I have a completely different relationship with that album. And there are very few of the records which I've got at the moment that I don't have a good relationship with. A couple of the later Mission albums aren't amazing, I'll put it that way. Some of the Megadeth albums have aged like milk. I think that's because I've got M, by the way, just down there, which is why I'm doing that. But overall, music is a lifelong passion and obsession for me. I think it's fair to say it's my thing. And some people have cars, and some people have football. I have pop music. That's my thing, and it's as strong as it ever was. I think it's fair to say. I'm format agnostic. So I don't particularly care what format it comes in, as long as it's not cassette, because I've only got one cassette player. If it's vinyl, CD, MP3, DVD, I don't care. The main thing is it gets in here and it gets in here, and that's what matters. So yes, I mean, I do spend a lot of time listening to vinyl. I have a small portable vinyl player that I put out in the garden when the weather is particularly good, like today. I listen to a record. I make sure it's in the shade. I have a nice speaker set out. I just kind of sit in the sunshine and read a book and listen to music. And today I listened to an album by the somewhat disgraced Moby, and an album by Mogwai, one by Frank Turner, and I listened to Tour de France 3D by Kraftwerk as well. So it's all going on. And in fact, recently, this album I did listen to, and I listened to both versions of it, by the way, before we get too far, is today, this episode, I'm going to be talking about David Bowie's unreleased until 2021 album that was recorded in 2001, Toy, available both in bootleg form, hello, I have a bootleg, and official release, hello, I'm an official release, you should buy me, not me, no, buy this one. And comes in various permutations, and I'm going to talk about this because to me this is not a new David Bowie album. This is an old David Bowie album. Most of the tracks have been circulating for a long time. A number of them were used as B-sides in 2002, around about the release of the Heathen album. So, for example, the Slow Burn single had Shadow Man and Wood Jackson on and some of the other formats had some of the other songs on as well. So this is probably where, actually leaping ahead in the chronology a little bit, most of the songs from the album were ones that you could own and buy long before the album itself actually came out. So here's the 2005 double CD version of it that came out, that, as far as I can tell, only has the tracks listed if you actually feed it into iTunes, which is a little bit of a swizz, or if you look at the disc. Oh, hang on, that's disc 1. Can you hear that? That's a police siren. I'm quite surprised there's a police siren. Now, in the interest of full confession, it is a Saturday night. My Saturday nights now involve me talking to my mobile phone about a singer who's been dead for 7.5 years, as opposed to me talking to people in a pub about anything else. Excellent. This is the second disc, which features all of the B-sides on. So it features Conversation Piece, which was on the 1970 period, Wood Jackson, When the Boys Come Marching Home, and then Baby Loves That Way, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, and Shadow Man, which were all from the Toy album. So 4 songs from Toy were released on the Heathen B-sides, in a remixed form, I believe, for various tedious contractual reasons. And when I heard of Toy was 2001. Bowie had been talking about how he'd gone back into the studio and he'd revisited his old songs with his new live band, and he played a couple of the songs on his 2000 short mini tour, where I think he played New York, Glastonbury, and the BBC TV Centre. Here's the DVD from Glastonbury. You will have seen this from a previous episode. And during the course of the shows in 2000, I think he played London Boys and Can't Help Thinking About Me for the first time since the 60s. Let's quickly check. An EP which has the live tracks on. Yeah, so yeah, I Dig Everything and London Boys, I believe, were the exact tracks which were played. So let's get into it, shall we? I've danced about it a little bit. Let's do Toy by David Bowie. Now I'm going to go with the version that many of the Bowie fans first heard. This is a version that was circulated on the internet in 2010, allegedly from a hard drive that belonged to Mark Platty, who produced the record and did some mixing on it, and relatively low quality MP3s, and later converted into this LP. Oh, that's the cat talking. I'll let him in. Hang on. I've opened the door. I don't think he's interested. I think he wants to go into the other room, actually. This is the thing. When cats meow at you, and I've read that apparently when if your cat's bonded with you, if it knows that you're behind the door, it starts meowing because it feels like, you're my human. I've bonded with you. I should be able to access you whenever I feel like it, which is fine unless you go to the toilet. And then there's just like this little set of black paws that are kind of moaning at you and say, I just want to do my business. And it's like, no, meow, 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 I'm going to interrupt you. I'm like, really? And it's like, yeah, really, because I'm a cat. Cats don't respect human beings' privacy. That's not how they work. I have had a cat sit on the record player while I've been listening to a David Bowie LP, trash the LP, because that's a fat cat with a big, heavy butt. And I ran across the room to try and get the cat off there, at no small risk to myself, and completely ruined the LP. So, Toy, which was released in 2021. This is the version that was leaked in 2010. And it was recorded between July 2000 and October 2000, with a planned release in March 2001. And Bowie described it at the time as being not Pin-Ups 2, but Update 1. Is a very interesting approach of actually revisiting songs that you wrote as a child or a youth when you're actually an old man and going, do these songs still work? What, with the benefit of hindsight, am I able to provide to these songs now that I've lived with those songs for 35 years? Very similar in some respects to the opinion dividing U2 album Songs of Surrender. And it was inspired partially by Bowie at the Beeb. So that was a show that, or more correctly, Bowie at the Beeb was a radio sessions album that was released in 2000. I have the CD over there. where Bowie had to re-listen to a lot of his earlier material, which he hadn't listened to, I think, for a number of years, because when you're boldly going forward, you don't want to look in the rearview mirror. I'm going to go and get the CD now. And this is Bowie at the Beeb, and it features radio session versions between 1968 and 1972 of songs including Karma Man, Silly Boy Blue, Let Me Sleep Beside You, In the Heat of the Morning, London by Tata, and a whole bunch of other tracks. Effectively, a whole bunch of unusual old Bowie tracks. Really like this LP. It's not amazing, because radio session albums never are, and I really wish that the Bowie at the Beeb would have had a deluxe expanded edition that would have been, 14 CDs or something. But instead, Bowie listening to his older material for the first time in a while and revisiting it, and he disowned a lot of that, never played much of it live. I think gave him an opportunity to come back to it again and think about it now. So if I had those songs and they hadn't been released, what would I do with them? Would they sound different or better? So there were 13 songs that were recorded in 9 days, and then there was a second set of sessions, which happened after Bowie became a father. You can tell the difference between the two sessions, because the second set of sessions feature a stylophone, and the first set of sessions don't. And the album was then picked up, and the second set of sessions were produced by Mark Platty, who didn't listen, when he was producing it, he didn't listen to the original recording. So he didn't listen to the Manish Boys' early version of I Pity the Fool, or Take My Tip, or You've Got a Habit of Leaving and Baby Loves That Way by Davy Jones in the lower third, or, for example, I Dig Everything, Can't Help Thinking About Me, or anything like that, off these two terrible 10 inches, which are the most affordable and easy way of getting his super easy stuff, super early stuff, on vinyl. That said, if you wanted to own most of the material that appears on Toy, the best place to go is for this CD, David Bowie Early On, 1964 to 1966. This features I Dig Everything, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, and I think Baby Loves That Way is on here as well. And there's a number of his earlier songs. So this is a compilation CD released in 1991 of all of his pre-debut album singles, with a number of unreleased songs that are on there as well. And is it good? No. It's fascinating, but it's not good, by the way. And so, therefore, if you want to listen to Toy as was in its original form, you do need to track this down. If you haven't got it, it's quite expensive now, I think. It has not been issued on vinyl. It's been deleted for about 30 years. It's somewhat disowned in the Bowie catalogue early on, but it is absolutely essential listening. You can also, however, pick up a lot of his early stuff on the debut album. Some of the material is also on this, Images, which is not great, and also on this, The World of David Bowie. And this isn't good at all, because this is effectively most of the debut LP, plus a bunch of extra tracks. So this adds to it 3 songs which aren't on anything else, plus some singles. And it does feature, Let Me Sleep Beside You, Karma Man, In the Heat of the Morning. And it's also got the absolutely appalling Sell Me a Coat, which sounds like he's singing to a farmer that he really wants to buy some goats. Also features Silly Boy Blue and the London Boys, which appear on Toy. So, yeah, early stuff there. Now, the first track that was officially released from Toy was on the B-side to the Heathen era singles. There's 4 songs which came out on there. The album kind of fell through the cracks. Bowie said he'd recorded it, then he went in the studio and recorded it again, and then he wanted to release it. Virgin, for some reason, were not convinced on releasing it. A really strange period, actually, in his career, 2001, because David had been around for so long. He had taken effectively 30 years without taking a break, released an album every 2 or 3 years, pretty much. He'd been very solidly in the public eye near constantly. I think people were starting to take him for granted. The idea was, he'll always be there. He'll do an album every 2 years. You can rely on him like clockwork. And if you don't like the album he puts out, well, there'll be another one in 6 weeks anyway. And I think there was a complacency, and I think he was taken for granted by the record labels. The album was still in the running and potentially able to be released until late 2001. The 9/11 attacks happened on the 11th of September 2001, and then I think the world just changed, and there wasn't a space in the world for David Bowie singing re-recordings of his obscure and lost 60s singles. You know, EMI had an issue as well. One record company, they had lost 40% of their value. Their market share had dropped by 40% because of Napster and Soulseek and things like that. They'd made a 28 million loss due to a Mariah Carey film called Glitter. EMI needed Let's Dance 2. They didn't need Update 1. And so they rejected the album because Bowie was always there and he'd do something that would be better than this. There was a degree of complacency, a degree of that, well, there'll be another one that comes out soon. And it really felt to me just what a catastrophically bad idea to just go to David Bowie and go, your album's not good enough. You know, as a label, as John Lydon said, your job is not to dictate terms or you know, to dictate what's in the art. Your job is to sell the fucking record. That's it. I make the art, you sell the art. That's the job. And I think it was a little bit disheartening. You know, Bowie found himself effectively without a label for the first time in a long time, almost redundant or unemployed. Instead, Gamey decided to carry on and re-record some of the material because there were 2 original songs that were on the original configuration of Toy, add extra new songs that he'd written, and then those became the Heathen album in 2002. The album was dead by the 11th of September 2001. Next morning, it was over, and Bowie was living in New York. So he was, living in and amongst and part of the whole thing. He was up to his neck in it, though he could probably see the World Trade Center from his apartment. Because remember, like the Eiffel Tower in Paris, you could probably see the World Trade Center from every single viewpoint in the entire of New York, because that's how New York works, how Paris works. Everywhere I've ever been in Paris, you can, of course, see the Eiffel Tower from absolutely everywhere because it's 10,000 feet tall. That isn't true. It's sarcasm, of course. And so the original configuration of this, which was leaked in 2010, was rough mixes. It started with a track called Uncle Floyd, which was 6.5 minutes long, longer than the version that was released on Heathen. That was an original, later retitled as Slip Away. We had Afraid as well, which was the other original. I think that had also appeared on Heathen. And then we had on this version, we had Baby Loves That Way, which wasn't released on the bootleg LP, but it was on Slow Burn in Japan and the Everybody Says Hi CD single in 2002. So there was no point to stick it on the bootleg version of Toy in 2010. There was I Dig Everything, which is track 3 on here. Conversation Piece was originally track 5, but that was released on the 2 CD version of Heathen. So again, no point sticking it on the unofficial version of Toy. There was Let Me Sleep Beside You. Then there was Toy, Your Turn to Drive, which hadn't been released at that point. Toy, Your Turn to Drive was released in 2014 on the Nothing Has Changed compilation album, which is here. Nothing Has Changed. This also, by the way, features all the singles running in a reverse chronological fashion, starting from Sue or In a Season of Crime all the way through to Liza Jane. And so this features for the first time on an official Bowie LP, apart from early on, the single versions of Liza Jane, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, Can't Help Thinking About Me, Silly Boy Blue, In the Heat of the Morning, and on CD1, track 9, Your Turn to Drive, also known as Toy, one of the few originals which hadn't been previously released in any form. And Your Turn to Drive was originally made available as a download with pre-orders of the, I think it was the Heathen or the Reality album from HMV.com in 2003. But I think David felt that it was too good to be just left abandoned like a car at the side of the road and stuck it on Nothing Has Changed, primarily so that you could still understand that it was actually a genuine song worthy of inclusion in the Bowie canon. We also have on here Hole in the Ground, which was I think it hadn't been released previously. Then we have Shadow Man, which I think is on the Slow Burn single. In the Heat of the Morning, You've Got a Habit of Leaving is not on here, but it had been on the Slow Burn CD in Japan and the Australian and also the UK CD single of Everybody Says Hi. And we also have City Boy Blue, Liza Jane and London Boys there. There was also a cover version of The Who's Pictures of Lily that was recorded at the same time, and I think, and I haven't looked at the back, so let me just check. The Pictures of Lily, I think, is on Recall 5 inside the Brilliant Adventures box set. Yes, it is. Yeah, there it is. So that's the only one of the Toy tracks which isn't on Toy and isn't, but is on Recall 5. Officially, in 2021, the album did get a release. It got a release first and foremost as part of the Brilliant Adventures box set. Here's the CD version. I have the vinyl version as well, but here's the CD version because the vinyl version is very heavy and very big. And it featured almost all of the songs which were going to be on the album, aside from Uncle Floyd and Afraid, and of course on Recall 5, a number of the, or more quickly, just one track, Pictures of Lily. So that was the first official release of Toy in the world, was on Brilliant Adventures. And of course, then when they did the box sets, they always used to throw in the box set, mate, the previously unreleased album or mixes or tracks or something to make you go and buy the box set. Reader, I bought the box set. And so therefore, of course, Toy got released 20 years after it had originally been recorded. And the 2021 version of it features a slightly different track listing, slightly updated. And it features, and I'm going to go for here, this is the LP of Toy, the 2021 version that came out. Firstly, that cover art was by David, and I think it was more a proof of concept than a final piece of cover art, because let's not muck about here, it looks like some pretty bad, cheap, amateurish Photoshop, doesn't it? And that's exactly what it is. Made in 2001 with some very bloody primitive software indeed, probably still cutting edge at the time. And they've managed to make a whole LP out of it. Personally, I would have gone back and redone the cover, but what do I know? I'm only a guy who spent money on it. And the official 2021 version has a reconfigured track listing. So that starts with I Dig Everything. I Dig Everything being from the Early On and one of the singles. Then with You've Got a Habit of Leaving, which again, if you want the original version, is on Early On. London Boys, which is on the B-side of Rubber Band. And I don't know if it's on here. No, it isn't. We have Karma Man, which is on The World of David Bowie. Here. Hello, I'm Karma Man. And also, then we have Conversation Piece, which, as I've mentioned, was already on the 2 CD version of Heathen. And it was the B-side of The Prettiest Star. We had Shadow Man, which had been previously unreleased but recorded in 1971. Let Me Sleep Beside You, which I think first got an appearance on The World of David Bowie. Hole in the Ground, which was a previously unreleased demo from 1971. Baby Loves That Way, which is on You've Got a Habit of Leaving and also on Early On here. Can't Help Thinking About Me, which is on Early On. And City Boy Blue, which is on the David Bowie debut album from 1967. And then finally, Toy, Your Turn to Drive, as previously made a HMV exclusive with pre-orders of Reality in 2003. Is Toy any good? Yes and no. If it had been released at the time, I think it would have been criticised as unoriginal and as unnecessary, because most of the songs already appeared on Early On in the various singles in the debut album. But what you have here is actually, it's a really interesting LP, not good, but interesting. Certainly I'd probably put this in my lower 5 David Bowie LPs, alongside Tonight, Never Let Me Down, probably Hours, and the debut, and maybe Space Oddity. It's definitely his worst album in a very long time. So certainly, if it had been released in 2001, it would have been his worst record in 15 years, and I think it would have spent the goodwill which he got from Glastonbury and spoilt it, I think it's fair to say. So, starting off with I Dig Everything, which was recorded in 1966 in the summer of love, or the summer of England winning the World Cup, for example. It's a great little song, but it's very flippant, actually. The idea of just sitting there and going, I dig everything. It felt to me a little bit childish or childlike, I think it's fair to say. Perhaps not a great song at all. And then You've Got a Habit of Leaving, track 2, is an interesting song. Probably one of the most mature ones, because You've Got a Habit of Leaving reminds me of, and hopefully you will not have no experience of this whatsoever. But let's say if you're 22, 23, I mean, certainly I and a number of other people that I knew around about that age, the relationships that we had with our respective boyfriends and girlfriends were very on-off. We were always getting dumped or getting taken back. And there was a certain point where my then girlfriend in the mid-90s dumped me many times, like 6 times or something, and we were together for 7 years. And there came a certain point where in my head I was like, if you do that again, that's it. I'm not taking you back. I'm not, the idea that I can be picked up and put down like a toy and picked up again, felt very, not abusive, because it wasn't. There was no malice in the person, but there was an indecisiveness around that. I needed a degree of commitment, and I didn't need necessarily to be picked up and put down quite so many times. You think about young relationships when you're young. Relationships aren't necessarily secure. They aren't necessarily. You can't take things and build foundations on there, because you don't know if those foundations are going to be there in a week or a month's time. Of course, you can't take anything for granted actually these days, but I think there's a degree of permanency around things in a very immature way. And when you're very young, by the way, you have a thing called object impermanence, which you believe that if you're not looking at it, it can disappear out of existence. You can't take its existence as something which is, granted and set in stone. A very curious way of thinking. And so the relationship had a degree of object impermanence around it. So You've Got a Habit of Leaving, which is very clearly a song that was designed to sound like The Who, is a song that is probably one of the better songs about teenage relationships that's ever been written. Apparently, in Bournemouth in 1965, when David was supporting The Who, he played that song. And Pete Townsend said, "You're trying to write like I do," which is a funny and interesting way of approaching the situation. Of course, Pictures of Lily, which was recorded during the same sessions, is a Who song. So everything is a circle, a snake eating its own tail. Now, track 3 is London Boys, which I've mentioned previously was on the B-side of Rubber Band and on the compilation album World of Morrissey, World of David Bowie. And it was first played, first played for a long time on the 19th of June 2000 at New York City. It was first recorded in 1965. It was considered to be re-recorded for Pin-Ups in 1973 as a potential single when Pin-Ups was in its early days, but it was never re-recorded. I got the feeling London Boys was a song that David never really felt 100% that he'd done justice to until he re-recorded it, because obviously he thought about coming back to it 2 or 3 times during the course of his career. We then have Karma Man, which you can very clearly hear the Beatles' influence in that, but also the influence of Tibetan Buddhism, which David had found in the 90s and had started to build into his life. And then we have Conversation Piece, which was originally a 1969 demo, This one is, I think, a very interesting song. It was, as I said before, it was on the 2 CD version of Heathen in 2002. It was a song that also was the B-side of Prettiest Star, and I get the impression that David thought of it as a song that perhaps deserved its time in the sun a little more than it actually got. It's an interesting song because it's a sense of being almost resignation or a sense of empty despair about it, but not necessarily a sense of giving up, but more a sense of being like in a holding pattern or a circling pattern around a situation. We then have Shadow Man, which was, as I said, an early 1971 Ziggy Stardust era demo. It was never quite finished at the time, but yeah, the 1971 version of it does circulate on the internet, because almost everything's on the internet these days. And then we have Let Me Sleep Beside You, which I've mentioned before, which was a rejected single for Deerham in 1968. Let Me Sleep Beside You is very obviously a copy or heavily influenced by the Rolling Stones' Let's Spend the Night Together, which came out at roughly the same time. The original version of Let Me Sleep Beside You was the first recording that Tony Visconti made with David Bowie in 1967. And there was also, by the way, a version in German that was recorded, but again, these were rejected by Deerham. So I think obviously they did come out eventually. They didn't appear on early on, but obviously I think they appeared on the World of David Bowie. And then there's Hole in the Ground, and then Baby Loves That Way. Although I did think called Baby I Love That Way. Baby Loves That Way is a really strange idea. Oops, yikes. This is what happens when it goes out live. Baby Loves That Way is a strange and unusual song, actually. It's the first song in popular culture I can think of, really, that kind of addressed basically the concept of cuckoldry. The idea that, you know, Baby Loves That Way is if you love somebody, let them go and they will come back, is one of the concepts or the ideas that sits beside that. Yet in this one, it's almost about saying, well, you know, Baby goes with other guys, and it's kind of sat there kind of thinking, well, if that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do, and that's what I have to live with. You know, if you love somebody, set them free and they'll come back to you. But of course, that doesn't always work that way. It's a strange song. It's slightly weird. That addresses some weird, well, not weird, but then uncommon concepts around things like monogamy and polygamy and immaturity and an unequal power balance inside a relationship. So very unusual, actually, for a song, certainly at that point, and not one that was actually commonly addressed even then. Then, of course, we've got Can't Help Thinking About Me. And Can't Help Thinking About Me, track 10, the second rejected Deerham single from April 1968. And that's, I think, it's one of many Bowie songs are pep talks to himself. So all through his career, he's done songs where he's talking to himself, trying to talk him into or trying to explore a way of thinking. All the way through from Can't Help Thinking About Me, all the way through to I Can't Give Everything Away, the last song released during his lifetime. A lot of the songs that he recorded were effectively solo pep talks to himself to explore his ideas and his thinking about certain sets of events and circumstances and try and make sense of them, to kind of go, you know, even something like, you know, Fashion, I think, is a song where even though he's observing what other people are doing, he's also kind of geeing himself up into a certain situation. So like a motivational speaker, I think, in some respects, which is a really curious way of approaching songwriting. Not many people were doing it, but it's very kind of strong and interesting. Right, track 11, Silly Boy Blue, previously heard on the debut album, and again revisited, I think, as I've mentioned before, because of the Buddhist connection that came to Bowie in the 90s, when he found that, and not necessarily as a religion, but as a belief mechanism more than a number of other ones. It's a Buddhist lyric. It revisits some of the themes that were also visited in 7 Years in Tibet, and it's quite interesting. And then the last track on the album, Toy, Your Turn to Drive, rescued from unjust insecurity and obscurity as a download-only MP3 from hmv.com in 2003. And that is Toy, the Lost Bowie album, not the Great Lost Bowie album, but just the Lost Bowie album, that eventually through time has become part of the official body of work and part of the official canon. It's not my favourite Bowie album at all. It's a curio. It feels like a B-side compilation of previously unreleased material, because obviously it is. It's a modern day revisiting of old ideas. Try and find some consistency that sits within it. Now, of the 2 track listings of the album, I think because I've known it longer, I prefer the version that is on the unofficial rough mixes. But if you don't have that, and it's okay if you don't have this one is absolutely fine and well worth getting as well. But you don't listen to a record for its cover, do you? Is probably the best way to describe it. Not long after the release of Toy came the release of Toy as a standalone album. So when they sold Brilliant Adventures, they started off an exclusive, previously unreleased Bowie album, Toy, in the Brilliant Adventures box set. You won't be able to get it anywhere else. And technically that's true, and technically it's not true, because Toy got a release as a 6, 10-inch and 3 CD expanded edition in January 2022. This is the CD version, because the 6, 10 inches cost something like £118. And I can't be bloody bothered in spending £118 for an album that was deemed not good enough to be released 20 years ago. This features the whole of the Toy album on CD1 and 2 previously unreleased songs on CD2, which are Liza Jane, the first single, I think, and also a re-recording of In the Heat of the Morning. So disc 2 is alternatives and extras, and disc 3 is unplugged and somewhat slightly electric, which feels to me like just an excuse to put out a bunch of alternate mixes in a 3 CD box set. This is about £18, by the way. This is a lot more like it. And again, it presents Toy more as a kind of a definitive kind of run through the working drafts of absolutely everything that he's done, as opposed to anything else. We've got the MMI, which clearly indicates the year 2001, photos, lyrics, and things like that. It feels like it's a Bowie album that could have come out at the time. Had it come out at the time, it would have been a disappointment. It would have been written off, might not have been toured substantially. I think having the way that things turned out overall was much better, but it could have been much worse. And then you've got the players there on the LP. Mark Platty making his first appearance, Earl Slick making an appearance back on a Bowie album for the first time in a while, Alan Dorsey on bass, You Know Her, there's David with his head facing backwards and so on. There's nothing about it that feels like it didn't come out at the time, apart from the fact that it didn't actually come out at the time, which is a dead giveaway really, isn't it? CD2 is all mixes by Tony Visconti, so perhaps the original first mixes of the album in the first track order and running order, which is slightly different to the finished version. CD3 is early mixes by Mark Platty, and whilst it says acoustic and somewhat slightly electric, it's more a case of just going, well, these are 2 alternate versions of the album. None of them are any more essential than any of the others. I think I prefer CD1 if I had to, but CD2 and CD3 are absolutely fine, and they again feature slightly different configurations of the tracks from the album. But listening to them, and you kind of go, there's a difference, because the differences are minuscule, and you don't necessarily need them. And so for somebody that already had Toy on both the bootleg rough mixes from 2010 and the 2021 version in the Brilliant Adventures box set, I didn't see any point buying this on vinyl, because the mixes were so indistinguishably different in many ways, as made frankly absolutely no difference whatsoever. Of course, it being Record Store Day, we got the release of another Record Store Day EP, this time the Toy EP. You've got it made with all the toys, 10-inch there, which are ridiculously expensive, and CD edition, this time featuring the radio edit of You've Got a Habit of Leaving, which was service is a terrible word, sent to radio, and websites. Shadow Man, a vocal and piano mix of that, another alternate mix of Shadow Man, and then an alternative ending version of Silly Boy Blue as well. We've got the live BBC Radio 1 version of Can't Help Thinking About Me, and live versions of I Dig Everything and London Boys from the New York show. All on a ISO 10-inch or CD. 6 whole songs, which for £34 for the 10-inch is a bit ridiculous, but that's how Record Store Day works. 2001, in the real world, the one you and I lived in, or if you weren't born, the one that you were not lived in, was slightly different. The major Bowie release in 2001 was, I think, the retail version of All Saints, a collection of David Bowie instrumentals on CD. Undoubtedly, this is going to get a double vinyl version for Record Store Day that's probably ridiculously limited and cost £52. Originally, All Saints was presented, I think, in 1993, I think, as a present for Bowie friends and family. It came in a wooden box. 350 copies were made, and it featured a different track listing, because this features some additional instrumentals that hadn't been recorded and didn't exist in 1993. Most particularly, I think, Brilliant Adventure, but also featuring LP debuts for Crystal Japan, and I think an extract from the Philip Glass Bowie Symphony there. Not amazing. And to think we had this instead of Toy, which makes you wonder what the fuck the record company were thinking. But there you are. A completely inessential part of the Bowie catalogue. Instead, the songs from Heathen, because you never let a good idea go to waste, or more correctly, the songs from Toy were repurposed for the 2 CD version of Heathen that was released in 2002, which features some additional tracks. The re-recording of Conversation Piece was on here, and as I've said before, the 2 CD version that was released in 2005 features 4 songs from the sessions as well. So eventually they all sort of maybe trickled out, but you got 5 songs from the last album were repurposed as B-sides from the Heathen era, and those songs on the B-sides, as I have mentioned before, were Shadow Man, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, Baby Loves That Way, and Conversation Piece. There was also a number of other B-sides that were released around about the Heathen era, but I'm going to talk about that when we talk about Heathen in the next episode. That is Toy. It's an unusual period of time to be a Bowie fan, it's fair to say. I think that Toy was much, much better than Time particularly gave it. I think it would have been a really great LP, actually. A nice palette cleanser, shorn of the expectations of a great artistic statement, and just being, a guy releasing records that he wanted to, and revitalising some of his lost songs from the era. I think Toy would have been a really good little LP, and it would have, frankly, the world really needed a nice, flippant, cheery LP in 2001, considering what was happening. But instead, 9/11 murdered that idea, and the album was dead in the water. And shame on the record company for thinking, we've got a David Bowie LP, but we won't release it because, reasons. And instead, what we'll do is we'll send out a compilation of scattered instrumentals. What a bloody stupid idea that was, wasn't it? So, since Toy as an LP didn't exist in 2001, I can't talk about videos or touring or promotion or live shows or anything, because there weren't any. This was an album that was stuck in a shelf, in a box, in a drawer, and forgotten about for years, apart from by, frankly, the crazies like me that really wanted to hear it and tried to piece it together. It's, I think, also a really interesting resetting and rescoping. Reimagining is such a terrible word. When you have reimagining, you end up thinking that they're going to replace Robert Downey Jr. with Adam fucking Sandler or something. you know, for Charlie Chaplin. And if you want to hear the originals, of course, do seek out. They're now deleted and difficult to get early on CD. It's essential to understanding the complete Bowie picture. And whilst you are able to pick out the 2014 Nothing Has Changed compilation, which features some of those songs. So, as I've said before, this features Liza Jane, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, Silly Boy Blue, and Can't Help Thinking About Me, and In the Heat of the Morning. It's a very different beast to this. This is this is an essential piece to understanding David Bowie's discography, it's fair to say. So that's Toy. Thank you for indulging me talking about an album that didn't even come out when it was recorded for 45 minutes. And hopefully you will come back and watch future episodes. If not, oh, I've got so many I've got such delights to show you, as they said in Hellraiser. I haven't really. I've planned my next 12 episodes already. I know what they're going to be. 13, actually. Because I've got an episode 300 coming up, and I've got something that I haven't prepped yet for that. But I've got 12 episodes, which I know I'm going to be planning in future. I've got the notes already all worked out. I haven't filmed them yet. I'll do them when I do them. That's how it works. So, as the late, great Jerry Springer said, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I will see you soon. Okay, thank you. And if you've made it this far, do listen to the records, by the way. That's the whole point of these things, is to make people kind of go, oh, I never knew about that, or that's interesting, or to hear a record in a new light. It's been very rewarding for me to go through my record collection bit by bit, to re-listen to the songs, as opposed to just listening to them when they came out and going, oh, that's not very good, I'll go and listen to something else instead. Coming back and really getting under the skin of a record and really becoming, you know, very, very familiar with what's in there. If nothing else, these are ways in which I am able to re-examine parts of my record collection that perhaps I previously missed, and to be able to understand them better and get a new appreciation for what's in there. I still can't appreciate the cover art. It's awful. And I don't know what you were thinking, David, but next time, get some prose in. Your back catalogue could really do with it. So there you are. So that is Toy, and thank you very much for making it this far. I will see you all soon. Okay, bye.